In this video, we're going to compare two catamaran listings for catamarans that are 44, 45 foot in length. Very popular models. The primary lens will be through Liveaboard suitability, and that encompasses comfort, safety, and quality of life. So let's jump into it here on the computer. Because I want to compare two boats that are similar size, similar year, like model year, and similar price. And I think someone who would be looking to make a purchase for a sailing catamaran of this size would probably be comparing these two boats. So let's walk through how I would do this and what I'm seeing when comparing these two boats. So the two boats that we're going to be comparing today are a Leopard 44, a 2016 Leopard 44 for $489,000 in Florida, and then another one, a Lagoon 450, 45 foot long in Charleston, South Carolina, $430,000. So you see that this one is a good $60,000 more expensive and dropped its price recently. Does it feel like you're getting $60,000 worth more stuff, or is this other one, this 450, this Lagoon 450, that's a bit cheaper, a good deal compared to the other one? We'll walk through both of them. First, let's run through the Leopard. So the Leopard 44, it's the Leopard that's got like a front porch and with a door right here. What are the top things they want to talk about here? It's got upgraded engines, folding props. These are expensive. Additional upgrades and more. Never been chartered, meticulously maintained. So they're saying, hey, this is in really good shape. It's got all sorts of upgrades. Looks like it's been lived on. New sail drives, new electronics due to an insurance claim. That might have been a lightning strike. So, presumably, good if you have all new electronics, but lightning strikes might leave gremlins in the system, so that'd be something to ask about. This said this is an owner's version, but let's double check. Yeah, 3 cabins, 3 heads. So one hull will have 1 head and 1 cabin, the other will have 2 cabins, 2 heads. Let's look at 206 gallons of water, not bad. Decent chunk of fuel. One holding, this is a little bit ambiguous. 44 gallons isn't a ton if you're gonna have all the berths filled up, but I'm not sure if this is one 44-gallon tank or a number of 44-gallon tank. That's a little bit, if it's just one, that's kind of small. That's probably how the boat was just designed. So this says it's a 44, and we're gonna talk about this later, but if you look at the length overall, it's actually 42.5 feet. 4-foot draft-ish, pretty shallow draft, and then a pretty big beam. We got electric flush heads, a washer dryer, a transom shower, bilge pumps, holding tank, watch indicators ×3. So that kind of leads me to believe that there's 3 holding tanks, which 3 40-gallon tanks is adequate. Let's see, what else do we got? Smoke and carbon, well, it says carbon dioxide detectors, but I'm pretty sure that means monoxide detectors. Monoxide is the one that'll kill you. Dioxide's the one that makes you cranky. Let's look at batteries. So 4 210 Lifeline AGM batteries for a total amp hours of 840. I mean, this is workable, but it's not lithium, and nowadays there's a big, why not go lithium? But they're fairly new, so you wouldn't necessarily want to completely put brand new batteries in this for this price point. So when running heavy duty appliances, you might be running the generator a little bit more. They do have a 3,000 watt inverter and dual 30 amp shore power lines, which gives you plenty of power at the dock. Victron Multi Plus, so that gives you, that does the smart charging, the smart assist thing. So it actually basically makes your boat 150 amp, because one side can pull from batteries some, and then the other branch of your 30 amp would be 30, so effectively making you an 80 amp boat on dock for short periods of time. Chargers, what about the generator? Genset 6 kilowatts, 2003 Northern Light. That's fine. I wouldn't call it huge, but for this size boat, that'll do most of what you need it to do. So I think this is completely adequately sized. Generator, 6 times 75 watt solar panels. Not a ton. That's not a ton of power from your solar, but depending on how you live, that will keep you topped up. 2 1600 BTU air conditioners. Depending on how they're ducted, this should be adequate for that size boat, but it kind of depends on how it's ducted. If you have like just one in the salon and one in the owner's hull, then maybe the guest cabins would be less. Well, I'd be a little bit uncomfortable, but depending on how this is ducted, this is good. I'm not seeing anything to do with water maker on here. So this seems like a pretty lived on boat. A lot of pros, but let's go in and look at the pictures. So here we are somewhere, I guess I said it was Florida. You can see that this model boat has a smaller, what's it called, trampoline. But here is the floor plan. We're going to compare the floor plans in a little bit, so we're not going to go too in depth about the floor plan. It is always nice when the listing broker includes a floor plan. A lot of them don't. From the outside, so nice big cockpit seating area. It looks like it has a pretty good shape, quality enclosure. At very least, it keeps the water out and the wind out. I don't know, it doesn't say if there's any shading or screens that can fit into here, but this does seem to be pretty, it looks like maybe there's some screen in there. It's hard to tell. It's a high quality enclosure, and that's a pretty big deal for giving you more living space when the weather is foul. Crane davits dinghy, pretty big dinghy. And you have your half raised helm station here. Same, these are never comfortable stock, and it looks like this hasn't quite been upgraded, so not a particularly comfortable seat to sit on, but it looks like a functional, well-equipped helm station. The new electronics that I was talking about, hatch covers. I'm not sure what this part is. This part looks like it's more part of the enclosure or something, so maybe this is where some screens are. And it looks like also, it's hard to tell, this feels like it's a rain catchment, but I don't know what this is. If this is just trim that fell down or if that's a rain catchment system, like a gutter or something. Here's your front porch, big deck here, the shade to keep the front windows from being too sun exposed, too weather exposed. Here we have the windlass and probably a water tank, and it's hard to tell what this is, maybe a generator cover, I don't know. Some more pictures of the lockers would be great. So here you have your big salon and your seating area, vinyl looking cushions, adjustable table, storage here, and your galley on this side. Blinds on the windows, which is good. When you're at a marina, you don't really want people just looking in your windows, or at night on hook in a busy anchorage. Some floor storage here. Keep in mind these pictures will be taken probably with a fisheye lens to make them seem a little bit bigger. Galley, looks like propane cooktop. Yeah, fridge, power. This is a fairly newish boat. I mean, I guess it's about 10 years now, but all things considered, it's got a lot of the more modern design considerations. Life raft, no cushions I see up here. Your little solar panels kind of sprinkled around. They help. They're not big enough to really do a bunch of heavy lifting for you probably, but they're enough to kind of keep you topped up when on light use days. Engine room access there with those hatches. I mean, that looks like they have a protector on them, but I don't love having this style hatch right where there's a walkway here, just because this tends to take a lot of abuse, and I hate to accidentally break one of those hatches, but I'm presuming that's what this cover is for, to help the brake. There's your little wash down. That's a pretty nice perk. Owner's hull. It's nice. We'll keep marching through here. We have another boat to look at. Your stairs. I'd put some covers on these stairs. They look slippery. It looks like there's meant to be a cover in there. Ocean is home. Nice big bed. Hatch, ventilation. A little bit of corrosion here, wear and tear on this. Not big, really small sink. There's two heads in the port side, so this is going to be a smallish head on the port side. There'll be, ×2, so this, but mirrored, probably. Wait, this is the owner's side. There's your little Splendide washer. That's what we have. It's small, but it does a job. And that's it for the photos. We'll jump real quick into the Lagoon 450 to compare against. Let's look at its specs. This one's a little bit cheaper, but what's going on with it? One thing that catches my eye right here is, I won't call this crazy high engine hours, but it's high-ish engine hours. These Yanmars can make it to 8 to 10,000 hours, no problem, if they're taken care of. But if they're not taken care of, if they've been mistreated, then this starts to be in the warning zone for engine hours, and putting in new engines on a boat is kind of a big deal. It's a big job, it's expensive. So this starts to be not a red flag, but I'd say like a yellow flag. So there are diesel engine surveyors that can take a look, and for these many hours I would recommend that. On both of these boats, I forgot to say in the first one, let's jump back. On both of these boats I looked up their anchors. The Leopard 44 had a 55-pound delta anchor, and you want to basically size up every time for multi-hulls. So it's saying that a 55 delta anchor is adequate for 55-foot boats up to 65-foot boats. So since this is a 44-foot boat, it seems like it's sized up. So I would say that this is good. It only had 165 feet of chain or something, so it's a little bit light on chain, but the anchor sizing is adequate for the Leopard. For the Lagoon, their anchor size was an 85-pound anchor, and so the first one was a Delta, this Lumar anchor. This Lagoon had a 85-pound Mantis anchor, and it says, 45 to 50 foot boat, up to 50 knots of wind. It's fine. And, okay, size up a little bit. So you're saying this would still be adequate for, 45 foot boat, size up by 5 feet. It's still adequate. But when it comes to storm anchor, you're really trying to push it, right? Like riding out a Cat 1 hurricane or something like that. Then it's starting to get on the light side. So I don't know if the Lagoon's anchor would necessarily, I'd feel good sitting on it, in a little bit of a tropical storm. But for normal cruising, it's absolutely fine. And has lots of chain. I think it had like 300 feet of chain. So that's really, really good. Okay. So the Lagoon, we have the higher bit of engine hours. Let's look at the batteries on this boat. We have 5 270 amp hour lithium batteries. That's a lot. That is more than 1,000. Gosh, that's 1,300 amp hours or something like that of 12 volt power. So that's pretty big. It doesn't say when they were put in, but that's a big battery bank, much bigger than the Leopard. And remember, the Leopard was more expensive. We've got a big generator, 10 kilowatt, but it's getting up there. The hours on here, that's 10,000 hours on the generator. This is maybe why that's a little bit cheaper. You might have to price in, a new $20,000 generator soon here. But once again, if it's been meticulously taken care of and, the injectors rebuilt and the fuel pump rebuilt, and maybe this is no big deal. But yellow flag on that. 5,000 watt inverter, 5,000 watt for 220, and then another inverter, doesn't say. So the outlets so this must be running like the air conditioners and stuff like that at 220 or fridge. Oh, it's a 220 boat for shore power, but that's 50 amp probably. This is a transformer. So this boat is pretty well electrically kitted out. Let's look at a water maker. This does say it has a desalator, it's probably desalator, water maker, 3 times 46 gallon potable water tanks. It's a little bit small for a boat that big. We carry 200 gallons total. This is 150 gallons, and we're a much smaller boat than this. So a little bit small, but you had a big generator. Probably why the generator's got so many hours is because it's making lots of water and charging those big banks. So yeah, and this boat has a water maker. The Leopard didn't have a water maker. Let's look at renewables, solar. We got solar, much more solar. It's only 3 panels, but the other one, the kilowatts didn't add up to nearly what this one was. So we have solar. I don't think we have wind generator. No. Aft port air conditioning units on 12 volt when the generator is secured. So it doesn't say how much air conditioning there is. It says each cabin, but then it's saying there's clearly 2 units that are set up to run off the inverter, off the 12 volt system. So it's ambiguous how many there are, but with that big power bank, that's part of the reason why they wanted to be able to run in the owner's cabin. They wanted to be able to run the air conditioner at night without the generator, which is a pretty big plus. It's just still a question mark here of how much actual air conditioning is on this boat. And I don't see anything about a clothes washer or anything like that. So let us go into the pictures real quick. I'm getting the impression that this boat was chartered in the BVIs, or the USVIs rather, or one of them. So this was a charter boat. This is a 4-cabin version where the Leopard was a 3-cabin version. And you'll see here that it looks like it's all kitted out for cruising, for comfort. We got our big front porch area here. Just like on the Leopard, there's a big front porch, but this one doesn't have the overhang, which you could put an awning up, just rig an awning between the jib and the mast and put an awning up to get some coverage here, but there's no steps, like a front door, rather. Bigger trampoline, keeps the front of the boat a bit lighter. This is the fly bridge area. The Leopard didn't have a fly bridge. It had a half-raised helm, so good and bad. Like this one clearly has an enclosure, so you can be protected when you're in the fly bridge. It makes docking a little bit more difficult and more windage, but the fly bridge, it's kind of a personal preference thing. It is nice to kind of get up away from the weather when you're driving. Okay, this is forward cushions. Cushions seem in respectable shape, and the helm station cushions actually look fairly comfortable compared to the Leopard. And then we have an enclosure here also. Maybe looks a little bit more aged, but looks just at a glance like it's not sun rotted. You got the solar over here over the davits, and it helps protect your dinghy from getting too full of water and gives a little bit of shade. Table here, well staged. This boat's well staged because I think it's a working boat. For it being a working boat, though, it seems fairly low wear and tear. Cozy. Big seating, gas cooking, 4-burner gas cooking, so bigger galley. And I think you might feel that this boat's a little bit bigger. We'll look at the floor plans here in a moment. B-berth. So this is 4 cabin, 4 heads. So each head is a bit smaller, but there are not necessarily wet heads because the shower is separate from the toilet, which is nice. A lot more plumbing to have to manage having 4 heads versus 2, but and all those tanks. I didn't see how much. Let's see the holding tanks. Holding tank times 4, but it doesn't say how much. So that's a big question. If they're too small, I don't know. You could probably look it up how big the holding tanks are for Lagoon 440. So 450 rather. So I want to go and look. I have on the Liveaboard coaching website, we have a floor plan tool. So if we go to the Liveaboard coaching website, if you're interested in working with me, this is the site you go with all the information there. But on the site, I have a floor plan tool that we used to use on our other YouTube channel. And I've just moved it over here. I've revived it. And I've went ahead and put in. So this is a tool that I've built. And I went ahead and put in the floor plans. They were already in the tool. But I put in the floor plans for both of these. And we can compare them. So let's show the Leopard again. So this is the Leopard that we're just looking at, the 3 cabin Leopard, and we're comparing against this 450. So you can see here that if you look at the length overall at the end here, we kind of compare like half ghost the Leopard here. You can see that the Lagoon 450 is actually almost 3 feet. It is 3 feet longer than the Leopard 440. So this is where the numbers get confusing because they saw Leopard 440, Lagoon 450. Oh, that's one different, right? That's a 1 foot difference. Well, it's a 3 foot difference and a bigger beam. You can see here when I half ghost it how much bigger the beam is. The Lagoon 450 is a much larger vessel. The Leopard 44 should probably be called the Leopard 43 or the Leopard 42 even. So it's not an apples to apples comparison, but they do a good job in the Leopard 44 of kind of maximizing your livable space. If we toggle between the two, you see that we've got a bunch more empty space between the transoms and a bunch more empty space between the trampoline. Now that makes the boat have, a longer overall. It'll probably sail a little bit faster. Yeah, the birds are a little bit more forward as we compare between these floor plans here. But as we toggle back and forth here, you can see that the salon is very similar sized. I would say maybe the cockpit is a little bit bigger on the 450, but the salons are very, very comparably sized. You got the little front porch here. The front porch looks comparably sized. And then you got your heads. And it does look like these 2 small heads on the Leopard 440 are a bit small. You can see how small this sink is. And if you kind of let's keep that in mind as we toggle between the two, there's a little bit more breathing room in each of these heads on the Lagoon 450. Now, obviously, it's not a 3 cabin version. So the owner's cabin, I think they said they had chosen this one to be the owner's cabin because the port aft cabin could run off the batteries. I mean, you can choose whichever one you want, really. If you don't have enough people to fill up all 4 cabins, what you can do is just take one hull and basically convert the berth into extra storage and have one head as your wet head and one head that you use for showering and then one head you use as the toilet to kind of separate the spaces, or a his and a hers. You can do that too. If you really, really wanted an owner's version, but then you saw this Lagoon 450 here that came in a good bit cheaper, $60,000 cheaper, but was a bigger overall vessel, which will matter for comfort when sailing upwind. It's got its downsides too. It's harder to haul out. It's more expensive. There's going to be more bottom paint, a little bit more plumbing in this boat. My point is, you might reconsider if you really, really want an owner's version, or maybe just a little bit on the fence. You could make this, and then you can work with one hull being your hull, and more or less get the same effect. Because these little couches that they used to put in these hulls, I don't think they genuinely get used that much. Some people might put a TV on the opposite wall and sit down here, or have it as a little reading nook. But honestly, this is just a couch where you can kind of go to get away when you have people visiting that you need some breathing room from. But I don't think the couches in the hulls are necessarily the best use of space. And in a lot of newer boats, they don't put the couches down here anymore. They just put extra storage because that's what people are really valuing. So in this Leopard, that couch is kind of silly. So if you're not using the couch, then why have this whole owner's hull? Well, yeah, you get a bigger bathroom. That's fair. And then in some of these, I'll explain this real quick. In some of these boats, they say that these are berths up here, but that's really for crew and captain. It doesn't have to be a berth at all. Oftentimes there's no cushions in there and it's just for storage for like lightweight things, jerry cans, fenders, ropes, lines, sails, all that stuff. So just because it shows a bed here doesn't really mean there's beds in these crash lockers. So all in all, comparing these two boats, 430,000 versus 490,000. They've dropped the price a lot on this one. The biggest red flag on this was the generator, I think, and it didn't fully specify the air conditioning, so I'd want to make sure all the guest berths were air conditioned. This is a nice big boat. I mean, the sails look like they're in great shape from this picture. It's got a good battery bank. It's well equipped electronically. This one does have a water maker, but doesn't have a washer dryer. This one has a washer dryer, but no water maker, at least not one that's listed. This one is an owner's version. You will be paying a premium for the owner's versions because there's just not that many of them out there. It's a much smaller, well, I say much smaller, but when you're talking like apples to apples, 44 versus 45-foot boat, you wouldn't expect that there'd be that big of a size difference between the two. The bigger boat will be heavier. It'll handle, chop upwind better. But it's the Leopard 440. You got this really cool front porch. You can open the front door, get a really nice breeze through your boat. It's hard to say which boat is better. I feel like my gut says that the Leopard 44 is a little bit more turnkey ready because it's got lower engine hours and has all new electronics and already has a washer dryer in there. Now you could easily add one to the other boat, but like I think the biggest upgrades I would be making on this one would be adding a water maker, adding a lot more solar on this big bridge deck up here, potentially considering going to a lithium setup, but maybe not necessarily. But water maker and solar is fairly, all things considered, it's a fairly cheap upgrade. So you're talking 490 here. On this one, you're talking a much bigger boat, and there really is perks to a bigger boat. But the air conditioning was a little bit of a question mark if it hit all the cabins. Well, it said it did, but there wasn't a lot of details. But the biggest red flag I saw was needing probably a new generator soonish. And then it didn't have a washer dryer. Washer dryer is fairly cheap. You just have to find somewhere to get it installed. But the new generator, that'll be a big job. It doesn't say it needs a new generator, but a new generator. Also having 4 heads. I mean, the other one had 3, but that's a lot of plumbing. A lot of pumps and sumps and seacocks and things to go wrong. So more maintenance on this one. So it kind of depends on your setup. If you're a family and you're gonna have lots of guests, this charter one is a big win. But if it's just an owner's version, like just you and occasional guests, ooh, this Leopard 44 looks good. The sizing difference, I think, is the biggest thing I'd want to point people out, that these are pretty different sized boats and therefore kind of different beasts. So hope that helps you walk through when you're doing your shopping and you're trying to compare things here. You can use my floor plan tool. It's free to kind of get a better idea with the understanding between two boats and their layouts, with the understanding that like the number on the front is marketing. You need to really compare them next to each other to see the size difference, because on the surface, these two boats are similar price, similar age, and similar size, but they're actually very different. Both of them seem to be well equipped for liveaboard life, and I think both of them would serve potential new owners very, very well. So my name's Ryan. I can work with you if you're interested in working with me to do a similar style thing, like walking through listings, or if you already have a boat and you just want to figure out how to smooth your liveaboard life out some. The contact details for me are down below in the description. That's it for the comparison of these two listings. Hopefully that was informative for you. Let me know if you like this video. If there's any other boat types that you would be interested in comparing or walking through, game, just leave it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.